Welcome to the Pharmacy Frontiers podcast, a podcast dedicated to the profession of pharmacy. We're excited to welcome today the Director of Pharmacy from the Missouri Medicaid, Josh Moore, with the topic of how pharmacists and pharmacies can impact patient care in Missouri. Let me remind everyone that the Pharmacy Frontier podcast is available for streaming on your favorite podcast streaming app, whether it be Apple, Podbean, Spotify, or YouTube. The Pharmacy Frontiers podcast and the comments that we share today are the opinion of ourselves and do not reflect official statements from Missouri Pharmacy Association, Mercy, Mitchell Family Pharmacy, nor the state of Missouri. I'm Daniel Good, and I'll serve as your co-host today along with Tim Mitchell.
Hello.
Today we welcome Josh Moore, the Director of Pharmacy for the Missouri Health Net Division within the state of Missouri. Welcome, Josh.
Hey, thanks for having me. I've listened to a bunch of your podcasts over the last couple of weeks, and I'm really honored that you guys decided to extend me an invite and be on today.
All right. Do you use that to help you sleep at night, or you want to get a little drowsy when you listen to us talk?
Actually, I like to run quite a bit, so that's my time for podcasts, audiobooks, and occasionally music, but mostly podcasts and audiobooks.
Cool. Yeah. So
well, Josh, I think a lot of our listeners are curious to know, how did you get into this role with the state? Give us a little bit of background on how you came to be the Director of Missouri Medicaid.
Yeah, so I mean, a lot of it comes down to luck and then seizing those opportunities as they come about. I was pretty much an average pharmacy student. I think my teachers and classmates would probably attest to that still. But, we moved, my wife and I, to the mid-Missouri area. And when I graduated from pharmacy school, I was the pharmacist in charge at the Walgreens in Jefferson City, the 24-hour store there. And two of my PRN pharmacists one was at the state in my current role, and the other was a director of an account that worked with the state. So they actually convinced me to leave the glamorous community pharmacy world and go over as a vendor for a healthcare IT company that had a contract with the state as a pharmacist, where we did prior authorizations and whatnot. So I did that for 2 years and then was promoted to director of that account and worked there until this position came open, and I thought this is a fantastic way to be a public servant, to help out and lend some of my ideas to the state to see if we could improve healthcare for our patients.
Well, that's really cool. I didn't know that you had that role prior to coming into your current role. So that's interesting. So, I think it's very unique having someone that's in charge of our Medicaid system that has had experience and understands what community pharmacies are going through. And I like how you said the glamorous role, because sometimes it's pretty crazy. But so what's a typical day, look like for you? Or do you work from home? Do you work in an office? Do you, kind of give us an idea of what you do on a daily basis? So.
Yeah, so today I am working from home, but typically I'm in the office or traveling. As Tim and we chatted just a little bit before this started. I was in Portland, Oregon for a few days this week as we talked with the Drug Effectiveness Review Project. We went over a variety of items that are really interesting to us as Medicaid pharmacy directors, such as cell and gene therapies for sickle cell disease, approval of innovative products. And then this week, I'm actually flying out tomorrow to Washington, D.C., where we get to interact with the National Organization of Rare Diseases. There's a conference there where we're going to talk about those items as well. Cell and gene therapies are absolutely incredible. So I love getting to spend time learning about those and how transformative those can be on diseases where there may have been nothing for them before.
Right. That is amazing.
Yeah. And when I'm not traveling, we also have all of our prior authorization criteria that we review. We've got about 300 classes that we manage here at MoHealthNet. And that's everything from your average ACE inhibitor all the way up to the most expensive drug we have right now that we cover is $4.25 million for a dose.
Holy smokes.
for a pretty rare disease. So we don't have a whole lot of those, but also looking at the program, seeing any gaps that we might have to fill, where we're going to go next. We try to plan years out in advance on the market, the pipeline, what we want to do with our system. So we're in quite a few meetings. Daniel might have me beat on meetings per day, but I probably average 5 to 6 hours a meeting every day.
Oh, wow. That's crazy. So in your most recent week, you're traveling from the West Coast to the East Coast. That's crazy.
I am, and I'm trying to figure out how I'm going to balance that with sleep.
Yeah. And you have a family too, right?
I do. I have a wife and 2 kids, so we've been FaceTiming quite a bit.
Oh gosh.
Every day as much as we can.
Well, I'm
And
sure they miss you.
And you got to get a little time in on the road too, getting some of that adrenaline run out.
Yep. I do like to run, so I get to run in all these different places. So if you have Strava, you got to see me run in Portland, and now you're going to get to see me run in DC, hopefully.
There you go. Daniel, we're going to have to get more podcasts going for this guy so he can listen to things when he's running. So.
All right. Well, Josh, you have a great reputation across the state as being a great advocate for pharmacy, and the things you've done so far for us has been wonderful. Thank you for doing that. I know that others across the state appreciate that as well.
Well, thanks. I appreciate it. I really want to help enable pharmacists to provide the care that they can. I think when we started a number of years ago, MTM was already a thing, but really wasn't being done. Product was the main focus and still is the main focus for most pharmacies, but really looking to see how we can enable pharmacists to broaden and utilize that 6 and 7 year education that they're getting from pharmacy school to help our participants get better and healthier.
I believe at the last state society meeting, you mentioned that our pharmacists aren't taking full advantage of the programs that your agency has available. That there's still actually more room. There's more things that could be done, more reimbursement available. Is that right?
Absolutely. We're still under 100 pharmacists that are actually taking advantage of MTM across the entire state. And those are fairly concentrated to really about 10 pharmacists that are really doing it quite a bit. And then the rest are doing it sometimes. And again, we've been paying for MTM for well over a decade. We started reimbursing for pharmacists to be able to administer healthcare administered drugs for a number of years now, and we're still not seeing a ton of uptake in that. And that's something that we're really interested in seeing.
I can tell you, whenever I talk to other states, they're envious of what we have here in Missouri and the system that we have set up. Some of them aren't totally aware, but when I talk to them about the opportunities that we have with our Missouri Medicaid, it's people are very envious, and I think we're very lucky to have such a program. And I know it's changing all the time, or going to be changing down the road, but I do feel like there's so many opportunities for pharmacists, and it is a very tough market to be in right now with the reimbursement side on even just normal insurance plans that are out there. So I think it's important for people to be able to take advantage of clinical opportunities and consulting type opportunities with what you guys offer. So I appreciate that, and hopefully we can continue to work to get more and more pharmacists involved. So.
Oh, yeah, and I know some of the policies that we have around prior authorization aren't always the most popular, if you'll say, but I think some of those provide opportunities to have better interactions with their patients. As I think about our albuterol policy that we implemented a few years ago, we messaged that out to a bunch of pharmacists. We had a bunch of phone calls with stakeholders as well before that policy was implemented. And I looked at it not just as it's not a money-saving opportunity. Albuterol inhalers for us are very low cost. What it was more of was clinical care. We had so many patients that were receiving 12 to 20 albuterol inhalers a year. And the thing about albuterol is when you start overutilizing it like that, it's less effective when you actually need it. So not only are you overutilizing it and trying to respond to all these emergencies, but when you have a true emergency, it's not going to work as well. So we also put out information around SMART therapy, which is single maintenance and rescue therapy for asthma. And really the push was we are limiting, yes, albuterol inhalers. However, we're actually promoting this better option that's guideline supported. It's a fantastic opportunity for you to talk to your patient about it, because I can tell you, we get phone calls here at the state And one of our nurse reviewers actually had somebody that called. They said, my pharmacy says you're cutting me off. My doctor's office says you're cutting me off. What am I supposed to do? I can't breathe. And we ended up educating that participant on what we were trying to go after. And the patient actually was in tears. She had no idea that there was a way that you could prevent asthma attacks.
Right.
She had always thought that all you could do was treat them after they started. So that patient went back and now is on smart therapy. And we're actually doing a study to see at the macro scale what kind of benefit that had on our patients.
Right. Well, I think that's amazing. So go ahead, Daniel.
Great approach. I was going to say proactive versus a reactive approach. That's definitely what the trend is for the future, isn't it? That's where our students are being trained. That's where you're setting up programs. That's where we need to be, is proactive preventative medicine. Yeah. Absolutely.
Yeah, the product's not going away. I don't think it's going away, and it shouldn't go away for pharmacists. We should have a role in the product. I can still remember being there and saving a lot of near misses, or saying, you know what, this isn't really a near miss, but there's something better. You can't do it on all 800 prescriptions that you fill every day, but you can definitely make a difference. While it's one of 500 interactions for you in a day, it's their healthcare. It's their one healthcare. So individualizing the patient is really important.
Yeah, I totally agree. So I know I get a lot of questions from my pharmacists that work in our stores and other pharmacists. And and again, if this is an area you don't want to cover, just let me know. But, and patients even ask this, why Missouri Medicaid will cover branded name products versus generics that are available. Would you mind speaking on how that works in the Medicaid system?
Yeah, and I actually have a fantastic slideshow, I think, on this whole.
Well, we should have just put it up here.
I didn't have it available today. It's on my other computer, but yeah. So Medicaid actually has what's called the Medicaid Drug Rebate Program, and when you, as a state, opt into Medicaid, you can also opt into the pharmacy program. Pharmacy is an optional benefit within Medicaid. All 52 programs actually do have that. I say 52 because DC and Puerto Rico are also part.
Right.
So when you do that, if a manufacturer wants their drugs to be covered by Medicaid, they have to also enter into the Medicaid Drug Rebate Program. When they do that, all of their drugs become part of the program. So they can't pick and choose. There's a minimum rebate amount that those manufacturers have to pay. It's a higher amount for brand names than it is for generics. So sometimes the case is where a brand name is $200 and the generic is $190. And so after rebate, it is cheaper for us to cover the brand name. Now, as products become available longer and longer on the market, what has happened is sometimes they have negotiated side deals with the TBMs, and Medicaid gets what's called best price. So if you negotiate a better price with Express Scripts than what Medicaid would have gotten under the statutory limit, then we automatically get that price. The other thing that we get is inflationary rebates. So if a drug company comes out today with a drug that's $100 and next year decides they want to charge $1,000 for it, or even double the price, we actually get dollar for dollar rebates on inflation above the CPI. So there are some products out there where it actually costs Medicaid nothing to cover them after rebate. And there are a few products where we may reimburse the pharmacy $100, but we actually get more than $100 back in rebate for the same drug. So it's pretty complicated, and we can show all the math you want, but I think if somebody is running, they probably are already bored and walking at this point and have dozed off if they were listening to this going to bed. Yeah. But that is something that we watch very, very closely because it does save taxpayers a considerable amount of money.
Sure. Absolutely.
We don't do this for $1,000 a month or anything like that. What we're talking about is quite literally millions of dollars we save through this program. So that has helped us to keep the pharmacy program sustainable. As we compare our pharmacy program to pharmacy programs across the country in Medicaid, if we had followed the same trajectory over the last half dozen years as Medicaid programs across the country, we would have spent an extra $1 billion over that time frame.
Wow.
So I think the team does a fairly good job, actually pretty good job at managing the benefit to make sure that we're making a sustainable program. And as a Missouri and federal taxpayer, I've got to say, I really appreciate not having to overpay for our prescription drugs.
Absolutely. Well, and I will say that some people feel like, our state does overpay because they don't realize what's going on the backside to be able to help fund that program. And it's amazing when you start explaining to people, well, the branded name product is what's preferred because this is how the state is able to save money. Because it seems like, and unfortunately, rebates do get talked about quite a bit about, in the insurance industry, but it does support our state. So I think it's an important thing to mention. So absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. And I would love to see the day where rebates go away from the whole supply chain, because I know that there's a rebate at every corner, it seems like, in the pharmaceutical industry. And to give you an idea of the scale of the whole program, our budget's about $2.2 billion in terms of pharmacy for Missouri Medicaid. We collect back over $1.1 billion in rebates a year. So I haven't gotten this year's numbers yet because we're always a quarter behind whenever we invoice. That's how that program works. You have to wait for all the utilization to come in, and then you sum it up and invoice the manufacturers. But that $1 billion goes right back into the program to pay for medications. It's not something that goes back into the general fund. It does go to fund the program itself. And I don't get a single bonus based on any of that stuff. None of my staff do either, or our vendors. That money directly to the program, and we just try to really do a good job and manage that program really well.
Josh, how large is your staff? This is a big budget. How is your staff?
In terms of actual state staff, we're pretty lean. We're at 13 staff, and then we have a rebate staff that's about 7 people. But we actually work with a number of vendors. So we work with the vendor where pharmacies are very used to calling our prior authorization help desk. They handle about 30,000 phone calls a month and about 10,000 faxes a month. And that's one of our vendors. We also have another vendor that does the automation of the prior authorizations. What a lot of pharmacies don't realize is just how many of these we approve transparently. So we sit over 90% of our PAs are done transparently, which means no phone call. You didn't even realize that there was a PA that was going on in the background. So we have that. We have a number of pharmacists too. I'm really proud of our pharmacists. We have 4 pharmacists here at the state. We also work with 3 pharmacists at one of our vendors. Another vendor that helps us do our preferred drug list has 3 pharmacists as well. So pharmacists are heavily involved. We're pretty excited to have a fantastic team, and it's great because every one of them is smarter than I am.
Well, it's always good to surround yourself with smart people. That's for sure.
It's a sign of a good leader, isn't it?
There you go. There you go.
So Josh, what is the latest out of your office? And is there any new breaking news or anything that we need to make sure our listeners are aware of?
Yeah, a couple of things. I'll start with one that we've actually been working on for a while that we're pretty excited about. So we had Project Hep Cure, and I don't know that a lot of the retail pharmacies know about this. Mostly the specialty pharmacies, I think, and prescribers know about it. Project Hep Cure was something we launched back in 2021 to help jumpstart the elimination of Hep C. And what we've seen over the last 3 years is if we hadn't done that program, there'd be about 1,500 fewer cures in Missouri, because now there's actually a cure for Hep C. You can take this medication. I think it's 97% of patients can take 8 weeks of this medicine and be cured of a chronic disease, which is awesome because how many chronic diseases do we ever get to cure?
For real. Yeah.
So we're pretty excited about that program, and we continue to message to providers that test and treat. We actually contact providers all the time and say, did you know that you have this many participants that have Hep C that haven't been treated yet? You should go ahead and treat them, and we'll pay it. We don't have a prior authorization on Maverit. So 8 weeks and then they're done. The other item that I think is going to get a lot of attention is on January 9th of 2025, we are going to start covering anti-obesity. And specifically, Zepbound will be our preferred product, GLP-1, to treat obesity. We're going to have that criteria be what is in the label, basically, a BMI greater than or equal to 30 or greater than or equal to 27 and a comorbidity. We'll also, at the same time, have on the diabetic side of the GLP-1s, no prior authorization on Victoza, Trulicity, or Ozempic. So that means that participants who are overweight or diabetic and need a GLP-1, there won't have to be any paperwork that they have to fill out for Trulicity, Victoza, or Ozempic. Now, on the Zepbound side, there will be a prior authorization for those products, but it'll be a fairly straightforward form for providers to fill out so they can get access to these medications.
Can I ask a quick question? So, I mean, I see a possible opportunity for pharmacists to be involved in helping with physicians being able to calculate their BMI or whatever to help. Is that something that you guys foresee as pharmacists being able to do to help be able to get this approved for patients, or is this something that only the provider can do?
You know, I see pharmacists playing an important role because they're obviously going to be coming to you every month to pick it up.
Right.
We're still a 30-day supply state. So I think the important part is as they're titrating the dose, making sure that they know that, you know, for instance, on Zepbound, if you're on birth control, it's going to be less effective every time you go up in dose. And so you need to make sure that they're using a backup method.
Right.
There are also things like every time you go up in dose on one of these, you're going to have more GI side effects likely. So what other things can they be doing? A big part of this is actually not part of the medications potentially that they need, but if you're on a weight loss medication and you start losing considerable amounts of weight, you need to exercise because it's really important for these participants to exercise, maintain muscle. What we've seen is when you have dramatic weight loss with these medicines, you can lose a considerable amount of muscle, more so than if you were doing it only through diet and exercise. So making sure that they are exercising and the foods that they are eating are healthy, that they're lean proteins, that kind of thing. Because if they're eating, you know, Skittles or something like that, that's not going to be good long term. They'll lose even more muscle and lean body mass.
Absolutely. And so do you feel like there might, and I don't want to put words in your mouth or anything, but do you feel like there might be interventions available on the platform that Missouri Medicaid offers for pharmacists to help for these monitoring procedures? Is that something you think might be able to be added down the road, or what's your thoughts on that?
So I don't see us adding more modules to Direct Care Pro. What I think is, and I've been a big proponent of this, is we don't tell physicians and nurse practitioners how to run an intervention in the office. And we shouldn't tell pharmacists how to do those interventions either. Now, we do have Direct Care Pro there to use. I call it kind of like the training wheels. If you're getting back into the groove or you don't remember how to do this, you can use Direct Care Pro. But having the pharmacist do that SOAP note, do the chart, do all those things, really drive the intervention to the patient, I think is a really valuable tool that we need to exercise more often, and that will grow pharmacy as a profession.
Yeah, well, I think that's great. And, you know, I know there are many pharmacies that have diabetes programs. There's a few that have started up weight loss programs and trying to help patients, you know, get healthier. And I think this is an excellent opportunity and hopefully the makers of Zepbound will make it a good opportunity for Missouri Medicaid to be able to cover these, because I know they're super expensive, and that's been one of the big drawbacks for anybody to be able to get it. Is it's just very difficult. It has been, you know, some issues with supply, and I know the FDA just recently kind of pulled some of that off the shortage list, but hopefully that'll be something that will continue to be supplied on and be able to move forward. So.
Yeah, we're really eager. We hope the supply issue resolves across all the GLP-1s. It does seem like from time to time, depending on the label as well, some labels have shortage, some don't, even if it is the same ingredient.
Right.
But we're pretty excited. You know, this is our first set of drugs that really target obesity and do it in a healthy way, it appears.
Right.
Before that, we had phentermine, which had a lot of issues. We had always chosen not to cover obesity treatment because it seemed like you were trading one thing for another. But
Right.
now with these, especially as you watch all the new reports that come out on just how effective these products are, we're very excited to have these covered and to see what kind of benefit we can have for our patients. They are expensive, but it's an investment. And we know that we're not going to see it pay off in a few weeks. This is one that's going to be a multi-year investment.
So to that point, Josh, I think this is great news for the Missourians that they can benefit from this treatment. But for those critics out there that say, hey, this is really expensive, should we spend our money in other places? It's, as you describe, a trade-off. What's your response to those critics that are a little bit judgmental?
Yeah, obesity is a disease. I think there's a huge stigma out there about obesity. We've seen that it's a disease. It isn't just, oh, that person has weak will or something along those lines. I think we need to shift away from it's a choice and into understanding that's a disease. When people have hypertension or diabetes, we don't say, you know what, I'm not going to treat you until you stop eating donuts. Right. And, oh, you know, I've been treating you with insulin and I told you not to eat donuts. Now I'm cutting you off your insulin. That's not something that anybody would do anymore. I hope they never did, actually. And that's where we need to get to with obesity. If we can treat this effectively and have these participants and patients get to a healthy weight with healthy diet, I think we will save a ton of money down the road. Again, this is an investment. I don't think we'll save money this week or this year. But as we look 5 to 6 to 10 years down the road, I think we will finally see the bending of the curve back down and see our patients be much healthier.
I think you're absolutely right, Josh. That's the key, right? It's all those other ancillary costs of that disease state, whether it be physician visits, ER visits, other comorbidities. That's where a real expense starts to run up. And so this, I think we're going to see is going to be a very fair price to pay in order to get better outcomes and less cost to our patients.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we're kind of winding down here, Josh, and I always like to try to throw this out, and you know, hopefully you have an idea of where I'm going with this, but we'd like to try to kind of bring out something, you know, unique about you, something you maybe like to do, or you know, something that not everybody knows about Josh Moore, to kind of just make it an interesting podcast here, I guess. So you want to throw something at us?
You know, I think a lot of people know this, but I'm always very excited to remember and share. I was actually lucky enough that I met my wife at orientation of Still Cop. So from day one, I don't think either one of us would say it was love at first sight. It was more like love at second sight. But, you know, she actually got me through pharmacy school, made me go to all my classes. She didn't take your test
for you, did she?
She did not take my test for me, but maybe I would have done slightly better had she. And then, you know, while I did sit in the back row most times in class, she at least got me there, and that really helped me out. And
that's good.
And she really has helped me with my career quite a bit, and so have my kids, making sure that we're always putting patients first.
Absolutely. Well, that's great. Well, Daniel, you want to kind of wind us down here? I don't know if you had any other thoughts.
Well, thank you, Josh, for joining us today. We really appreciate your presence and what you've done for the state of Missouri.
Thanks.
And we want to thank our listeners for joining us today for this edition of the Pharmacy Frontiers podcast. We encourage everyone to share this episode with their friends and seek out the other episodes from the Pharmacy Frontiers podcast. On behalf of Josh Moore, Tim Mitchell, myself, Daniel Good, thank you for joining us for this edition of the Pharmacy Frontiers podcast.
Have a good day.